Shalom. My name is Rabbi Josh Caruso. I'm at Anshe Chesed Fairmount Temple, and it is really an honor for me to be here today and to help Bruce's family walk through these moments and to escort Bruce to his final resting peace. I know how grateful they are that you are here right now for them. You are here supporting them and caring for them. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing, a time for wailing, a time for birthing, a time for dying, a time for speaking, a time for silence, a time for seeking, a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Bruce's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. I invite you now to join me, if you wish, in the recitation of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This is my prayer to you, my God. Let not my spirit wither and shrivel in its thirst for you, and lose the dew with which you sprinkled it when I was young. May my heart be open to every broken soul, to orphaned life, to every stumbler wandering unknown and groping in the shadow. Bless my eyes, purify me to see humanity's beauty rise in the world, the glory of my people in its redeemed land, spreading its fragrance over all the earth. Deepen and broaden my senses to absorb a fresh green flowering world, to take from it the secret of blossoming in silence. This very Shabbat that occurs tonight at sundown features the first couple of portions in the book of 5 books of Moses. And in this week's Torah portion, we read about the familiar story of Noah and the ark. It's a story told over and over again to children of all ages, and it's a story that is lifted up for the preservation of life for humans and animals alike. But it is also a very adult story. It's about tragedy and loss and starting over again. It's about the precariousness of life, the ability to endure. It's a story about fortitude and about the ability to see the rainbow after the storm. It's about Noah, and the text tells us that Noah walked with God. You know, Noah, in this whole portion, never speaks a word. A whole Torah portion named after him. A story that has been known for thousands of years. And yet, no words. Noah walked with God. It says a lot about who Noah was. Someone who didn't need to say a whole lot to get the point across. to follow directions, to do what needed to be done, to follow God's word, to walk with God in kindness. And that reminds us of Bruce. Bruce walked with God. Didn't need to say a lot. Didn't need to be in the spotlight. Just wanted to follow directions. Wanted to do his job and do it well. He wanted to be that kind of person. He wanted to be a person of the heart. And Bruce had a heart. Even until he breathed his last breaths with a physically compromised heart, his enduring legacy will be his kindness, his easygoing qualities, the understated way in which he went about his business. Bruce walked with God. And today we recognize him. We pay him tribute. Someone who wouldn't want any of this. Not a lot of spotlight, no headlines. But despite of that, funerals and grieving is for the mourners. It's for us to remember him. So, as much as we want to respect him as an individual and what his wishes would have been, we ourselves need to grieve. We need to hear the stories and we need to remember him. Because ultimately, he just wanted us to set us right on our path that we can move ahead, doing our work, doing our job, just as thoughtfully as he did his. And so I now, to honor him, his 3 children, one of his grandchildren are going to come. 2, that's right. Thank you, Eliana. Are going to come honor him at this moment. Neil and Lee and Rachel are going to come up with Andrew and Eliana to share a few words.
Hi, everyone. First off, I wanted to thank everyone for being here on behalf of my dad. We celebrate his life. He was always so thankful for each and every person. When I think of my dad, I think of D, devoted to his family, A, ambitious and a very hard worker, D, dedicated to everyone in his life. My father was a great role model for me. He taught me to be kind and thankful for everything in my life. He was always there to listen and very knowledgeable also. He was an observer, a kind soul. I did have an advantage of being the baby and the only girl of 3 of us. But my dad also could lose his patience easily. I've seen it happen time and time again. You were a great papa, and we will miss you forever. Please look after us always. Love you.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. There's one thing I could say about my dad. Well, there's many, but we'd be here for months. He was a very hard worker, very committed to his family. When he grew up, he didn't have much, so he was very appreciative. There wasn't much that made him happy, proud. I mean, whether it was my grandma's cooking or anything, it didn't take much to make him happy. And he loved his kids, loved his grandkids. He knew a lot of people. A lot of people liked him. And I'm going to miss him at the car show. I know my Uncle Mark and cousin Steve will as well.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today, taking the time from everybody's busy life to come to honor my father. I'm Neil. I'm my parents' firstborn, and up front, I just want to get out of the way. I want to say that my dad was loved, he was adored, and he will be truly missed from my family. The really difficult thing about this is we never got to say goodbye to my father. He passed away very soon, very suddenly. It's difficult to handle that. My grandmother passed away almost 9 years ago. At least I had the opportunity to say goodbye. Didn't have that opportunity with my father. He suffered for a few years now almost. He went through a lot. He had open heart surgery. He had a pacemaker put in him. He went through a heart ablation. He just went through an awful lot, a lot of suffering. The day he passed away, he did not suffer when he was still alive. So when he passed quick. So at least we're grateful he left this earth in that way. This is going to be very difficult for my mother, because my mother and my dad were inseparable. They were always together. So moving forward, my family, perhaps some friends, will need some help and support for my mother. My mother did everything for my dad, especially towards the end, in supporting and caring for my father. She deserves a lot of credit. Mom, we love you. My father was the most honest, loyal, trustworthy guy you ever met. He was also extremely hardworking. He never hurt anyone. He never had a mean bone in his body. Rachel just mentioned he had short patience. Yes, he did, with handling us, his siblings, and his grandkids. That was his patience kind of got tested with handling the kids. I think we're all human. That comes natural. Before my mom and my dad got married, my dad was living alone in an apartment in Cleveland Heights. His dad had passed away when my father was the age of 16. His mother passed away when my dad was the age of 26. So my dad had very limited family, didn't have parents. They were gone at a very young age. And in time, he was living alone. In time, he met my mom, and they eventually got married. And they were together. My dad was working at New York Bakery at the time. And while they were together, he got laid off at New York Bakery. So my grandmother, Elsie Sustin, suggested to my father, why don't you go and get a job in a service department in a city, work for a city and get a city service job. So my dad went in the classifieds in the newspapers, saw the want ads. City of Pepper Pike was hiring. They had an ad. My dad went, he applied, he got hired on the spot, he started the next day. Along with that, he also worked at Corky and Lenny's in the evenings. So my dad basically had 2 full-time jobs. He had 2 full-time jobs. He worked at Corky and Lenny's for approximately 27 years. He worked for the city of Pepper Pike for 30 years. 2 full-time jobs, and he did that so my mom could stay home and be a stay-at-home mom and raise the kids. That's the way my household was, okay? My dad was an extremely hard worker. We didn't get to see him that much growing up in our youth. In the evening when he worked, it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. He had a few evening nights off, and then maybe we would see him a few hours during the day and the weekends. Okay? So we didn't get to see my dad that much in our youth. He missed quite a bit of the sporting activities, football, baseball, games, etc. But he was out, and he was supporting, he was providing, and doing the best he could as a father. Okay? He was an extremely hard worker. I recently ran into Bob Girardi, Pepper Pike Service Director, and he talked about my dad to me, and he had nothing but good things to say. He said my dad was a phenomenal worker. He had a lot of respect. He said one of the best workers he's ever had, and he just wanted me to, he wanted to convey that message to me and let me know how much he respected my father when my father worked there. So after 30 years of service, the city of Pepper Pike, my dad at least had the opportunity to enjoy approximately 13 good years of retirement. It's been out for 15, but the last few years have been rough on my dad. But at least 13 good years of retirement. And despite when we were young, my sister, my brother, and I, he didn't get to spend that much time with us during those years. He, however, was able to spend time with his grandkids. He was able to attend all of their sporting events, baseball, football. Like you were going to say that, Ellen? Okay. He was able to soccer, cheerleading, all the grandkids events. My mom and him went to go visit and watch. And he was able to share and experience those moments with my family. Eliana was a preschool student at Fairmont Temple. Every Friday they had Kabbalat Shabbat, which was singing and dancing, and my dad and my mom and everybody was able to attend that and experience those functions and festivities with the kids and the family. All the birthdays for the kids and the adults and the friends, all the functions and festivities my dad was able to experience and enjoy. My parents' favorite thing to do in the summertime was to go to the Highland Heights pool. They loved that pool. They were able to spend time with all the grandkids, the family, the friends, spend some quality time at the pool. That was our favorite thing. I say this, the moral of the story is, yes, he worked hard when he was younger and he had to sacrifice, but at least in the last 13 or so years of his life, he was able to enjoy some time, quality time with the family. My grandfather passed away at age 60. Preceding that, he was very ill for at least 2 or 3 years. He worked up until then. He did not get a chance to enjoy retirement and enjoy and see his grandkids grow up. My beautiful wife, Erica, her father, same thing. He worked and worked up until the end and did not get to enjoy retirement. His name was Dennis Sherman. So, outside of work and whatnot, for leisure, transitioning here a little bit, some of my dad's hobbies and passions were entertainment, were American pop culture. He loved drama, he loved comedy, news, media, anything media related, anything media related, entertainment. He loved movies, TV shows, music, national, local news. He read a lot. He read a lot of books. He read a lot of newspapers. He read a lot of magazines. I brought home to him the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. He was so grateful that I brought him home the New York Times. He says, "Thank you. This is such a great newspaper. I love reading this, Neil." He read and just absorbed so much knowledge with reading. He had a passion for entertainment. He was literally a walking encyclopedia of entertainment. If you would put on the Turner Classic channel. If it was a movie from like the 1940s, he knew every actor. He knew who directed it. He knew what date it was made. He knew it all. That was his passion. He used to watch. We used to watch Jeopardy. He knew all the answers on Jeopardy. We always encouraged him to go on the show. He'd win. He would do phenomenal. When I was younger, he used to watch Siskel and Ebert, and he loved how they critiqued the movies with the Siskel and Ebert show. And he knew he would be able to hang in there with them just as much and critique it just as well as they did. The show really should have been called Siskel, Ebert, and Klein. That's how good the show was. And, the tagline should have been, this is Siskel, this is Ebert, this is Klein, and we'll see you at the movies, So that's how passionate my dad was about entertainment. When I remember when I was a young little boy, my dad took me to the theater. In those days, I think it was a matinee. And he took me to see Star Wars Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And I think he was more excited to see it than I was. That's how passionate he was about entertainment. He loved Frank Sinatra. He loved Dean Martin. He loved the Rat Pack. He introduced me to this guy named Jerry Vale. I don't know who Jerry Vale was. If it wasn't for him, I would have never known who this guy was. De Niro, Pesci, Pacino. The first time I ever watched Goodfellas was with my dad, a classic movie. These are things that my dad enjoyed to do. He loved Elvis. My dad shares the same birthday as Elvis, January 8th. So, and I mentioned Dean Martin and the Rat Pack. My dad loved Las Vegas. What do you think of when you think of Las Vegas? You think of gambling. You think of drinking. Well, if you know my dad doesn't gamble. And my dad doesn't drink. And my dad doesn't really partake too much in the other activities that happen in Las Vegas. So what does he go there for? He goes there for the entertainment. He told me he's seen Don Rickles. He's seen Buddy Hackett. He went with my cousin Barry. Okay, they went to the Jubilee at the Bally's. If you want the details on that, talk to Barry. He'll tell you about it. Several years ago, my whole family went to Las Vegas, and my dad included, and everybody, and we got to see Siegfried and Roy. That was another show he got to see. So, again, anything entertainment and media related. One thing my dad always told me when we would talk is that the happiest day of his life. My dad was born January 8th, 1944, and he lived through some very interesting decades in this country, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s. And my dad was colorblind, and he always told me, Neil, the happiest day of my life was the day that I was ineligible for the draft for Vietnam. He was always happy for that. So that's something I'll always remember from my father. My dad was passionate about cars. His favorite car was a 58 Impala. Lee touched on him going to the auto show. He loved the Mayfield Village 50s cruise night. He loved old vehicles. My dad was an animal lover, especially dogs. I think the dogs love my dad more. Some people say there's a sense, the dogs sense a person with good nature and a good heart. Dogs always were attracted to my father. They always came to him and wanted affection and love and unconditional love, and the dogs gave him unconditional love back. My brother and Renee had Alex. Alex was one of my dad's. Alex loved my father, so Alex always went to my father for affection. My parents have their own dogs, Miko and Liberty, and Miko is a Bichon Frise. My dad would take them for walks, long walks, and the neighbors across the street, they're here today, Joan and Norm Fleeter, got their own Bichon Frise eventually within time, and my dad had gotten acquainted with them and became more friendly with Joan and Norm, and for 15 years now, they still walk the dogs, and they've become best friends. And many dog walking miles later, they have become best friends. So Joan and Norm have a special heart in our family because my dad was best friends with them, and it wouldn't have happened without our dog Miko and Bentley. So, in summary, I know I'm taking a long time here, but I feel I need to honor my father, and he deserves this. But my dad was a quiet, reserved, introverted man, somewhat introverted. He was a great guy to talk to one-on-one. He minded his own business. He never caused any trouble. He didn't like drama. He was really not the life of the party, okay? He didn't like the spotlight, okay? But he was the most genuine, most loyal, most honest, trustworthy man I have ever known. And these are the characteristics and qualities that everyone loved about my dad. And I'll end it with an example here. It was my cousin's Steven. It was his bachelor party. And if anybody knows about, if any guys have ever been to bachelor parties, you know what goes on at a bachelor party. And usually there is some form of adult entertainment, you know, and activities that happen at, what? All right. And the spotlight's usually on that, okay? However, the spotlight wasn't on what we think it was. It was on my father. Why was it on my father? Because it was uncharacteristic of my father to be there. He never had bad intentions. He always had the impression of being innocent. My dad was, everybody was so happy to see my dad having an enjoyable moment there. And my mom, I should have prefaced, my mom wanted my dad to go because she's like, Bruce, you got to get out of the house. You got to go have some fun, blow off some steam. You're stressing me out. So that even made it more, more funny. But at the end, everybody's rooting for my dad. Bruce, Bruce, Bruce. And I'm thinking to myself, why is everybody rooting for Bruce? It's not his wedding. It's not his bachelor party. It's Steven's bachelor party. So I'll leave on that note that, again, it was uncharacteristic. And that night, my dad was the life of the party at that moment. He didn't want to be. Like Lee says, he didn't want to be the life of the party, but he ended up being the life of the party because he attracted everybody. Ellie? Yeah.
So I don't know, what he did in the olden days, but I know he's a great guy to live with because I used to live with him, if you didn't know that. And he loves cars, like he said. He always dropped me off for preschool, and he only got to live in his new house for 16 days.
Thank you for that beautiful tribute from Bruce's family. As Neil mentioned, Bruce worked for 3 decades for the Pepper Pike Service Department, doing his work quietly and with purpose. He took his job seriously and understood that rubbish collection was only one way in which he could make a difference. Through the years, he met many neighbors and helped build a sense of community amongst the people he served. They cared about him as much as he took interest in them. He enjoyed all those personal hobbies, enriching his days and enabled him to connect with the important people in his life. All that pop culture, oh yeah, and all the reading. As I think, Neil, you had mentioned, he was a walking encyclopedia when it came to the world of entertainment. And indeed, he had all those VHS tapes. Remember those VHS tapes? Where he could watch all of his movies that he really enjoyed. And indeed, he loved cars, was a real enthusiast, going to auctions, the annual auto show at the IX Center with Lee and Cousin Steve and Uncle Mark. And Bruce and Harriet, you two shared a loving marriage of 47 years. You met because, Harriet, your families knew each other and lived nearby. And in fact, Harriet's mother, Elsie, knew Bruce's parents, and Bruce's mother shopped at Harriet's family store. When Bruce and Harriet got together, they had their first date at the Laplace at the Inner Circle restaurant. Only months later, they got married. And Bruce not only married his sweetheart, he married into a beautiful family that embraced him wholeheartedly. Harriet's brother, Elliot, was to Bruce like a second brother. And they were always there for each other through personal and professional challenges alike. And Harriet's mother, Elsie, became like a mother to Bruce. Living together, they all felt bound to one another, learned to respect each other. And of course, there were the wonderful Sunday night dinners, which Bruce truly enjoyed. Word has it that he really liked to eat. And when Harriet and Bruce brought these three beautiful children into the world, the strong connections and love only grew. Neil, Lee, and Rachel were the light of their lives. And Bruce was dedicated to being a good provider for the family, to supporting them in all their endeavors. He made sure to find time to take Rachel to dance class. He was often the only dad there. And then they would have the ritual of going to McDonald's afterwards. And Neil, yes, you always appreciated your conversations about pop culture and Vegas and movies and media with your dad. But most of all, Neil held his dad in the highest esteem. It wasn't about what he did as much as who Bruce was. As you mentioned, Rachel, he was an observer. He didn't need the spotlight. He was genuine. You had mentioned, Neil, that people were naturally drawn to him, but not because he invited it. It was just because of who he was, perhaps because he walked with God. He did it in a way that didn't shout from the rooftops, look at me, look at my example, but he lived it. He lived through example. Neil, you respected him for the quiet way in which he lived his life, and I know Lee and Rachel feel the same. His ability to do the right thing and to be on time, even early, which was of utmost importance. It wasn't uncommon for him to arrive quite early for work, always making that first stop for coffee at McDonald's. He was a man who his children respected, and his great-grandchildren and his grandchildren respected, because he lived with integrity. He loved his family unconditionally. And of course, Bruce was entirely devoted to his beautiful grandchildren, Andrew, Abigail, Eliana, Dylan, Romy, and Samantha. They, you, were so much of his world. And yes, you remember those very special times you got to spend with him. The precious times. The times when Papa would take you places and be there and love you. He attended every sporting event, play, and family function he could get to, even working these 2 jobs. And most notably and recently, he was able to get out of Menora Park for a little bit to be at Romy and Dylan's first birthday party. Oh, those kids really light up when you walk into the room. And for sure, it really lit up Bruce's soul. To be able to leave Menora Park for for a little bit to be able to get a respite from the life of being infirm and dealing, especially these last few years, with a host of medical problems. He was able to find a little time, steal away, and be with family. This has been a really trying time. In part, it's been hard on the family and especially on you, Harriet, because of the last couple of years and the labor of love, of taking care of him. A guy who never complained about anything, but it takes its toll on the caretakers too. But we also know how difficult it was for you because of how quickly all of this happened, and didn't really have the chance to say goodbye when he was still here on this earth in the way you would have liked to. But just know, you have done him great tribute today by speaking about him with great love and lifting him up. What you're really saying about him is, our dad, my husband, our papa, our friend, he walked with God. He lived and walked the walk every day, sometimes with bad knees, sometimes very tired and achy, with a difficult heart, but a big heart, a physically compromised heart, but incredibly emotionally loving heart. This is what it means to walk with God. You don't have to write beautiful poetry. You don't have to shout from the rooftops. You don't have to be in the front page of the newspapers. It's what you do when nobody's looking. It's what you do when you grind out every day and you live a life of integrity. It's really what you do when you don't say how great you are and how great what is you're doing. It's when other people say, that person, that's the kind of person I want to be. So you paid him great tribute today. And Harriet, we know how loving you've been to your husband. And we know how hard this is for you, but we also know you're surrounded by a lot of love, an extreme amount of love with your extended family. So at this moment, we say, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory, may Bruce's memory forever be a blessing. And I'm confident it will. And may he always rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Let us pause for just a moment as we consider Bruce and all the gifts he brought to this world and to our lives. I invite you now to rise at your seats for the chanting of El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Amsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, במעלות קדושים מותרים, כזורקים מזהירים את נשמת ברל בן רבקה וניסין, שהלך לעולמו, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני ונחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Bruce M. Klein. He has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May Bruce rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Amen.